Welcome into episode 3. We've got a lot to talk about today. We've got only a couple things to talk about, but a lot of things to talk about. We've got transfer portal news. We are in kind of the thick of the portal. We talked a little bit about it on Friday, but obviously that was the day it opened, so we didn't get a lot of information. Now we do. Now we have seen a lot of things happen. We have a lot to talk about with the transfer portal. But we've got a couple games. I know, with the heat of the moment here of the transfer portal, we do have a couple of games to talk about. I think, interestingly enough, I don't know if I said this on Friday's episode, but the season should be over by now. I really do believe that. I think Dan Lanning has said it best time and time again. The season should end on New Year's Day, so that way when the transfer portal opens up on January 2nd, that's where the focus can be. And again, no problem for still getting to look at football games at this moment in time. But we're going to start on Thursday, January 8th at 6:30 Central Time, 7:30 Eastern Time. The Miami Hurricanes, ranked number 10 in the College Football Playoff at 12-2, take on the number 6 Ole Miss Rebels, who sit at 13-1. Look, if you'd have told me a week ago today that this was going to be the game that we were going to get, I don't think I would have believed you. I could have seen Miami beating Ohio State. I could have seen that. But Ole Miss knocking off Georgia? No way. No way. But here we are. This is a game where it's interesting because when you think about Miami, you think about a really good defense, which, by the way, is really funny comparing this Miami team to the Miami team of the last couple of years, where the defense really cost them a lot of times. But now you think about this Miami team and you think about the defense. You think about the guys up front. You think about Akeem Mesidor and Reuben Bain Jr. For Ole Miss, however, you think about that high-powered offense. You think about the amount of points that they're going to put on you. You think about Trinidad Chambliss. You think about Kawan Lacey. You think about Trey Wallace. This is really going to be, I think, whoever can make the game the way they want to play it, if that makes sense. Whoever can play the game that they want to play will win this ball game. When I'm thinking about Miami's side of things, they were able to they did a really good job, I think. I mean, Jeremiah Smith had a really good game, but they stopped that run game. You go back and you look at the Notre Dame game. They stopped Jeremiah Love. They held him to 33 yards. Granted, I do think that was a lot on Notre Dame more than just Miami, but Miami absolutely had something to do with that. Time and time again, we have seen Miami put together good defensive performances. It took Louisville 4 interceptions to knock off this Miami team back in October. Isaac Brown did have 113 yards rushing, but that game as a whole, first of all, has been vindicated by this Miami Hurricane team. I think they've done more than enough by going into Texas A&M and winning that game, by beating Ohio State last week. They've done more than enough to prove that game is long over, is forgotten. Right? The way they closed out their season, the final 4 games that ultimately got them to this position in the college football playoff, like it or not, they're here and they're in the final 4. They've done more than enough to forget about that Louisville performance. Do I think Carson Beck has another 4-interception game in him? No. Do I think Carson Beck could come out and play a poor game against Ole Miss? Yes. And that's kind of my concern. That's my concern for Miami. Because if Ole Miss comes out here and they are able to, I don't want to say fire on all cylinders, because I don't see a world where Ole Miss does that. I think Miami's defense is too good. But if they put Miami's offense in a position, they put Carson Beck in a position, if they put Mark Fletcher, who's been phenomenal during this postseason, in a position to be great, where they have to go make a play, And I said this about Carson Beck against Ohio State going into that game, that I think that it could come down to Carson Beck having to make a play, and I don't think he can do that. If it comes down to this offense having to make a play for Miami, that's my worry. That's my concern, because if you look at Ole Miss and this offense, I mean, for the most part, to beat them, their one loss this season was to Georgia, who scored 43 points. 43 points. And since that game, Ole Miss has looked pretty doggone perfect. And granted, it's a little different because they've had Pete Golden coaching them for the last 2 games, whereas it was Lane Kiffin throughout the entire regular season. But for the most part, to beat this team, you're going to have to score 30 or more points, for the most part. The couple of instances where you haven't would have been the back-to-back stretch of LSU and Washington State, which was right before that Georgia game. And by the way, I thought Ole Miss played pretty solid in that Georgia game, that first one. I thought they had a chance to win it. But again, that's neither here nor there. Can Miami come out here and either hold Ole Miss to under 30 points? Or can they put together maybe their best offensive performance of the entire season? I think that's what you're going to have to do in order to beat this Ole Miss team. Because you look at Oklahoma. Oklahoma's defense was absolutely phenomenal. I think it was one of the best in college football all season long. Granted, that playoff game against Alabama, maybe you think a little differently about it, but throughout the regular season, calling Oklahoma's defense the best in the country, that was not a hot take. In fact, a lot of people believed that. On the road, Ole Miss scored 34 points against that Oklahoma defense. Another thing that I think could come into play in this game, because we've established that Miami has a really, really good defense, and we've established that Ole Miss has a really, really good offense. Those are 2 givens. Those are 2 knowns. What we haven't talked about is the energy of it. And I continue to say college football, sports, but college football and specifically, it's all about energy, right? When you look at Miami, and after they beat Ohio State, it was business as usual. They expected it. They carried themselves in a way of, you could listen to Mario Cristobal after the game talking to Scott Van Pelt. Business as usual. We expected it to be here. This is not a surprise. Ole Miss, did anyone expect them to be here? Was anyone really picking Ole Miss to? A few people obviously were picking Ole Miss to win, but Ole Miss, I think, could be more in a... the Ole Miss fans are so high on Pete Golding now. You go and you beat the SEC champion in Georgia in an electric game. I would imagine that fans are still riding that wave. Where is the energy at? Where's the focus at? Are they focused? I think absolutely. I think that question kind of answers itself. Miami is favored by 3.5 points in this one with an over-under 52.5 points. These, of course, according to DraftKings. This is an interesting game. And the more I sit here, the more I sit with it, the more interesting it gets. Because I'm putting myself in the scenario of Ole Miss scores against anybody. They continue to score against anybody. But Miami, how can you bet against that defense? How? People wanted to bet against that defense against Ohio State, me included, saying that they couldn't keep up. They wouldn't be able to keep up. That's the same thing I'm saying right now about this Ole Miss game, is I don't think that Miami can keep up with Ole Miss. And that would be why I would pick Ole Miss if I did. Same thing was said about Ohio State, and they win 24-14. They dominated on the defensive side of the football. Dominated. Outside of that first drive of the second half, Ohio State's offense really had no answer for Miami's defense for the most part. We just keep coming back to this game. I think that Miami wins this game. I mean, obviously, either team has a chance to win the national championship because, of course, they're going to be there. But I really think this Miami team, like, this is kind of the game that I think a lot of fans need. And I'm not talking Miami fans. I'm not talking people that are fans of the program. I'm talking about people like me who are, they've seen Miami through these first couple of games. It's like, okay, well, you beat Texas A&M in a game that was certainly favored towards you because of the weather. It was extremely windy at Kyle Field. Okay, you beat Ohio State, only one team in the 12-team playoff era. 8 games have been played, or 8 teams have had a bye. Only one of those teams have won, and we'll talk about them in just a moment. So there's that aspect to it. Both of these teams are playing red hot. And I think with that 3.5-point spread for Miami, they certainly have more to lose here. Ole Miss is playing with house money. They did not expect to be here. I don't think Ole Miss, if you'd have told them at the beginning of the season that Ole Miss would be in the Final Four of the College Football Playoff, if that's all you would have told them, you don't tell them Lane Kiffin leaves. You don't tell them Austin Simmons is no longer your quarterback. I think they take that and they run with it. I really do. Last year was a little bit different. I think they had national championship aspirations with Jackson Dart and the number 1 portal class. This year was a little different. And now you're hopeful because Trinidad Chambliss is making every effort to be able to come back and play for Ole Miss next season. Kwan Lacey is going to come back and play for Ole Miss next season, which I talked about on another podcast, the HN College Football Show on Spotify, if you're interested in listening. That getting Kwan Lacey back had to be number 1, because if you can get a guy like that back, if Kwan Lacey's coming back, then what's everyone else's excuse? I think that's some big news for Ole Miss coming out of this week. Saying the sentence that Ole Miss is going to beat Miami, I mean, the information that we've learned in the last week, saying the sentence that Ole Miss is going to beat Miami to go to the national championship game, I'm certainly considering it more than I did against Georgia. If that makes an Ole Miss fan feel a little bit better, I'm certainly considering Ole Miss knocking off Miami more than I probably ever considered them beating Georgia. But something about this Miami team, something about a guy like Mark Fletcher, who has, every time his number has been called, he has made a play throughout this postseason. He was phenomenal in the Texas A&M game. I thought he was really good in the Ohio State game. I would argue that Ole Miss's defense is the worst that he's going to be able to see throughout this playoff. I think this game could be very similar to the Notre Dame game for Miami. I think this game could be very similar. You look back on that game, and that game was close with Notre Dame. That was a competitive football game. But when you really go back and you watch it, like, Miami had control of it the entire time. There was really never a moment where, maybe when Notre Dame had tied it, or even that C.J. Carr no-look touchdown pass where you're thinking to yourself, okay, Notre Dame, like, this is fine. They're fine. They're going to win this game. It's fine. But realistically, Miami had control of it. And they had that boa constrictor hold on that team. I think that's what this game is going to look like. I really do. Where Miami makes a nice play, Ole Miss makes a nice play, and they get a little bit of momentum, but right when they get that momentum, Miami just tightens that grip a little bit. They just tighten that grip a little bit. I'll say this. I told you going into that Ohio State game, I gave you the hypothetical Miami of, okay, if they can make this game ugly and they can make this defensive showing, then they win. I'll give you that for Ole Miss, because if this is a shootout, I think Ole Miss wins. If this is a shootout, if this is an offensive performance, if the over hits, then Ole Miss probably won. Because I don't think this is going to be a blowout. I think the 3.5 line is pretty accurate. I don't think this is going to be a blowout. If this is a shootout, if this is a back-and-forth game where, again, it's a teeter-totter and Carson Beck down 4 late in the game has to go make a play, we've seen that. We've read that book before. We've watched that movie. which, by the way, I would like to throw in here. I'm a huge believer of conformity gate. I think it's real. Those who know. This is one of those where it feels so obvious. It feels like Miami's the obvious pick, but is it? I'm going to take it. Because I think when you think long, you think wrong. And I'm going to trust my gut on this one. And I have felt Miami all the way through this. This last week, I have felt Miami. So I'm going to stick with that pick, and I'm going to pick Miami. And if I'm wrong, I'd be happy to be wrong. Because I think Ole Miss going to the national championship, after everything that's transpired over the last month and a half, I think that would be a beautiful story. I think that would be a very, very cool story. Miami playing a home game for the national championship. Look out. I'm going to pick Miami final score 28-24. Maybe 28-27. Something or another. I can't see Miami scoring over 28 points. I really don't. I really, really don't. I really don't. But I am going to pick Miami to pick up a victory and go to the national championship in Miami. Oregon, Indiana. I was listening to Solid Verbal earlier today. Phenomenal podcast. And there was a phenomenal comparison made for Indiana. And it was to Scotty Scheffler, who's a golfer. But it was a really cool comparison because they said, Indiana doesn't bogey. The way Scotty Scheffler doesn't bogey. And I thought that was maybe the best analogy that I've heard about Indiana football all season long. Because they don't bogey. At worst, they par. They're going to birdie it. They're going to eagle it. But they're never going to bogey it. They have a bad drive off the tee box. They're going to make up for it with a nice iron shot. They screw up their iron shot. They're a little further from the pin than they wanted to be. They're going to knock down a phenomenal putt. They throw the pick six, and this is very important because this game has already been played this season. I say I'm not necessarily against rematches. There's just times where, Alabama, Oklahoma, I didn't think we needed it. Tulane, Ole Miss, I didn't think we needed it. This one's an interesting one because both of these teams have won at least one game. In Oregon's case, they've won two to get to this point. And I don't think the first game was particularly close. I don't. I think Indiana really dominated that game. You take the pick six away. Which, granted, you could say that about, Miami and Ohio State last week. You take the pick six away, Ohio State might win. Well, you take the pick six away, it's 30-13 in that game. So, and that was at Oregon. That was in Autzen Stadium. So here on a neutral site, we saw how Indiana fans packed the Rose Bowl. Which I don't know off the top of my head the amount of distance from Bloomington, Indiana to the Rose Bowl. But I'd tell you this, Bloomington, Indiana is a whole lot closer to Atlanta than Oregon is to Atlanta. So I think you're going to have a pretty pro-Indiana crowd here. How much will that make? How much of an impact will that make? I don't really know. Dan Lanning is a great coach. And when I talk about the schedule and how I believe that the season should already be over, I know that's not directly from Dan Lanning because I think a lot of people have had that belief and have had that way of thinking for a while now. But Dan Lanning talked about that going into the Texas Tech game. And I love it. But as far as winning big games, he won the Big Ten championship last season. He beat Penn State in the Big Ten championship, and then he beat Penn State this year. That was a big win, don't get me wrong, but we saw what happened to Penn State since they beat him in the Big Ten championship. We saw what's happened to Penn State since they beat them at Penn State this season, at State College. It's not been great. It has not been great at all. I guess lately it has been with Matt Campbell, and they're bringing in the entire Iowa State football team. Maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. My point is here with this is Dan Lanning has not rose to the occasion just yet, in my humble opinion. in my humble opinion. I don't think that Dan Lanning has rose to the occasion. This would by far be the biggest win of Dan Lanning's career. And granted, for any coach that's left here, any player that's left here, it's probably the biggest win of their career. Like, obviously. But Dan Lanning's had opportunities before. He was the number one overall seed last year. Again, we've seen what's happened with those bye teams. So I'm going to, the Ohio State game. I mean, Dan Lanning's won big games, don't get me wrong. But I'm saying that rising to the occasion in the big moment when you need it, I want to see it happen with Dan Lanning. I have to see that happen. We've seen it with Curt Cignetti. We've seen it. We saw it earlier this season against Dan Lanning. We saw it on the road. Granted, I can't call Dan Lanning beating Penn State and then bring up Indiana beating Penn. But I will bring up Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship. I'll bring up Alabama. They beat them by 5 touchdowns. So I've seen Indiana do it. I've seen Curt Cignetti do it. And again, Dan Lanning has won some big games in his career. Don't get me wrong. But Curt Cignetti in less time has done more. He just has. If you imagine you give Curt Cignetti Oregon's resources. That's not the point. We're not having a coach debate. We're having a team debate. Who wins this football game? I don't like rematches. I just don't. I think it's bad energy. I think that for the team that won the last game, I just don't like the way that it sets up. I just don't. Here's a player that I think you need to watch. Because when this game was played back in October, the leading receiver for Indiana was Elijah Surratt. He had 8 receptions, 121 yards, and a touchdown. The go-ahead touchdown. Omar Cooper Jr. had 7 receptions for 58 yards. That was pretty much it. Roman Hemby had a couple receptions. Riley Nowakowski had 3 receptions. But it was really Surratt and Omar Cooper Jr. The player that you need to watch out for in this game really started emerging kind of after this Oregon game, and that's Charlie Becker. Charlie B. from Nashville, Tennessee. You're adding that third option. Because Roman Hemby, he had 95 total yards in this game. He had 2 touchdowns. Fernando Mendoza played really, really well in this game outside the pick 6. Surratt played really, really well in this game. I mean, you could go back and you could look, and this might have been Surratt's best game of the entire season. Truly. Now you're adding a guy, which, by the way, I think Omar Cooper Jr. was a really good number 2. Now you're adding a guy. Charlie Becker might have been the best receiver for Indiana in the last month or 2. I mean, seriously. I don't think he's better than Surratt. That is, halfway a joke. But he's been very, very good, and he was a non-factor in this game. A literal non-factor in this game. I think he's the player to look out for. Because you can have film on this Indiana team, and you can have what you need to do and know what you need to shut down. But how do you shut down a guy that you didn't play? You know who else was a non-factor in this game? Stephen Daly. Didn't make a single tackle, not a single sack, not a single TFL. Indiana still had 6 sacks and 8 TFLs in this game when it was played back in October. He's out for this, obviously. I'm not saying that, I am saying that Stephen Daly being out, it's just not that big of a concern for me. And it wasn't going into the Alabama game. Charlie Becker is a guy to look out for going into this game. And Brandon Finney Jr., I think he's going to have a better game. I really do. Granted, he played very, very well against Indiana the first time. He had 2 pass deflections. He had the pick 6. But he has just emerged as one of the best cornerbacks in college football. I think you're going to have people calling him the best going into next season. I'm curious as to how they will do that. I don't know off the top of my head if he travels. I don't know if he's going to match up with Surratt the whole time. I don't know if he's going to take one side of the field. But I do know that whoever he's guarding is going to have a tough time. Going to have a tough time. But they've got 3 guys you got to guard, at least. And that's Elijah Surratt, Omar Cooper Jr., and Charlie Becker. Oregon's offense is also concerning me. It's also concerning me. I was not that impressed with Oregon's offense at all against Texas Tech. I thought that was a defensive win, which granted, if your defense is playing the best football that it has played all season long, at this moment in time, I think you're happy about that. Don't get me wrong on that. But the offense did not play all that well. 64 rushing yards. They got outran. They spread the ball out really, really well. They had 11 different guys catch a pass. I should have had that written down. I didn't. They had 11 different guys catch a pass. That's something Indiana's going to have to worry about. They're going to spread the football out. But again, this offense wasn't great. They scored a garbage time touchdown late. They had a lot of opportunities to score in that first half, and they didn't. And I think they've got the best defense in college football. I'll just say it. I was trying to dance around it, but I just think they have the best defense in college football. I think it's better than Texas Tech's, who played very, very good in this game. Their defense. Think long. Think wrong. Indiana is a 3.5-point favorite, very similar to Miami. However, a little less scoring expected in this one. 46.5 points. From what we've seen with Indiana, you go back and you look at the Ohio State game, they don't need to score a lot of points to win these games. They really don't. They don't need to score, the way that Oregon needs to score a lot of points. I guess they don't, because they proved that they didn't have to this past week. But the way that Oregon has to win, it's different than Indiana. Because Indiana can win in a lot of different ways. They can outscore you. They can run you up and down the field. Or they can just straight up out-physical you. And they kind of I bet they flip a coin in the locker room to decide, all right, this is how we should do it today. I think Indiana's going to win this game. And again, the way that I feel about rematches, it has me a little worried, a little concerned. But the thing with Indiana, because I'm thinking about Alabama and Oklahoma. Oklahoma wins that first matchup in the regular season. Alabama comes back and wins. Alabama, Georgia. Alabama wins earlier on in the season. Georgia comes back and dominates. I guess Texas Tech, BYU. I guess that's one you can bring up. But the thing with Indiana is they don't have the same. They don't do the same thing that everyone else does. They're the only 12. They're the only team in the 12-team playoff history to ever win holy smokes! To ever win a bye game. Excuse me. They dominate Alabama. That was maybe not the most dominant playoff game that I've seen in the 12-year history of the college football playoff, but it's up there. It's certainly up there. After about Indiana's third drive, I didn't really think Alabama stood a chance. Even Georgia TCU, that game was 10-7 at one point. I guess for Alabama, you're looking back and it was like, well, at least it was 7-0. I think Indiana's going to win this game. Is it going to be close? Certainly closer than the Rose Bowl. I think you're going to see a lot of Indiana fans on hand. Let's take a look real quick, because the tickets for the Miami Ole Miss game I saw a get-in price of $50. I saw about $300 on this one. a few days ago. Tickets, and I think it's important because we talked about it going into the last few games. $184 to get in. Standing room only, of course. So maybe if you're in the Atlanta area, maybe if you're in Bloomington, Indiana, you're wanting to make a quick trip down to Atlanta, Georgia, there you go. I think Indiana's going to win. I will take the final score. Give me Indiana 23, Oregon 17. 23-17, Indiana wins. All right, let's get into the fun stuff. I'm going to check Twitter here really quick. And we're going to see if anything new has come out about the transfer portal. Not a whole lot has happened. Jace Brown did commit to LSU in the last 24 minutes. Hayes Fawcett reports that. That might be the only new addition, but we've seen a lot here. We've seen some pretty cool things happen. Mateen Ibaragba, he commits to Texas Tech. That was a big one, but I want to continue. Let's just keep talking about Indiana. They have the number 1 portal class right now, according to On3. They're in the playoff. They're in the playoff. Ole Miss has the 3rd ranked, by the way, which is pretty interesting. But when you look down here, I mean, Miami, I don't think they have a single recruit. I don't know if Oregon does either. Indiana is number 1. This portal class that they are bringing in is pretty impressive. They've already got their starting quarterback in line next season in Josh Hoover, who is pretty good for TCU. I think that Curt Cignetti and that staff, we've seen what they can do with Curtis Rourke. We've seen what they can do with Fernando Mendoza. I think that this is going to be just another brick in the wall. And Josh Hoover is just going to hit another level here with the Indiana Hoosiers. Turbo Richard, I was a big fan of Turbo Richard. And he's committing here to Indiana. Nick Marsh, he commits to Indiana. So they've got QB1, RB1, and probably wide receiver 1 going into next season. They've added pieces on the defensive side of the ball. Josh Burnham comes down from Notre Dame. Preston Zachman comes over from Wisconsin. This defense is going to once again be very, very good. And they're not done. I can't imagine Indiana's done yet. I just can't. That's another thing with this Indiana-Oregon game is you look at Tosh Lapoy and Will Stein. They've had to work 2 jobs. Tosh Lapoy going to be the head coach of California, who, by the way, they're having a very good portal class. Ian Strong commits there. They picked up a couple more before I went live that we'll definitely talk about. Will Stein at Kentucky. Oh, how can we go any longer about talking about Kenny Menchie? So, Kenny Menchie, for those of you who have not been following along in this recruitment, Kenny Menchie was at Notre Dame this past season. It was a very close quarterback battle in the offseason between him and C.J. Carr. He is QB2 throughout the entire season. And his limited opportunities, I thought he played very, very good football. I thought he played well. He enters the transfer portal, which was very expected. And he initially, it's looking like he's going to Nebraska. Okay. I was excited for Nebraska. They get their QB1. I don't think he's this what's the word I'm looking for? This experimental pickup. I think he's going to be really solid. I think he's got a pretty high ceiling, but I don't think he's an experimental pick at all. But then all of a sudden, the next day, he was a Nebraska's quarterback for a day. All of a sudden, Kentucky gets in the mix. Now, Kentucky's been in on Sam Leavitt, who's transferring over from Arizona State. All things are kind of pointing to him going to LSU at this point. With everyone else, I mean, Texas Tech has found their quarterback in Brendan Sorsby. Kentucky's found their quarterback in Kenny Minchie. Oregon, I guess, we're waiting on Dante Moore's decision. Maybe Oregon's still in the race for Sam Leavitt. That would be big. Miami, I guess, could still be in the race for Sam Leavitt. Who knows? But all signs are really pointing towards LSU right now, I think. But Kenny Minchie landing at Kentucky. I think Will Stein, I mean, he's bringing in some pretty talented pieces right now, in my humble opinion. We're going to keep a bookmark there. We're going to keep a bookmark there on Kentucky. Because I don't think that Will Stein's going to turn that thing around, in the next year. But Javante Barnes comes over from Oklahoma. Max Anderson comes over from Tennessee at the offensive line. Aaron Gates comes over from Florida to play corner. We're going to put a pin in Kentucky. Because I think that there are some really, really interesting pieces to come there. Texas Tech. Texas Tech's got a little money, huh? Texas Tech's got a little money. Austin Romaine was a really good pickup for them as well at linebacker. He was at Kansas State this past season. Going into the year, I was really excited for him. Like I haven't been a Kansas State believer for the last 2-3 years. But going into the year, Romaine was a guy that I did highlight as, okay, this is a really good player. So they've got him lined up. They've got their replacement for Jacob Rodriguez. I don't know if he's going to live up to the Heisman conversation ceiling that Jacob Rodriguez had, but I certainly think he's a very good player. They've got their quarterback in Brendan Sorsby. Trey White off the edge. Ibragbo we mentioned. Bryce Butler as well on the defensive line. 6'5", 295. He comes over from Washington. Okay, Texas Tech. Plus, they've got a pretty solid recruiting class coming in as well. I think some exciting stuff at hand there. Oklahoma State's taken everyone from North Texas. I mean, absolutely everybody. Ethan Weslowski comes over at linebacker. You're going to have Evan Jackson at safety. Kevion Huddleston comes over. He's on the defensive line. Fatifea Valea. Hopefully I say that right, on the defensive line. Colin Lewis at corner. Terrence Lewis at wide receiver. I mean, you just go down the list, but maybe none of them better. Wyatt Young as well, I think, is going to be very, very good than Drew Mestemaker. This is a team that I think can be competitive instantly. I really do. Forget Kurt Cignetti. Forget that conversation. I think it's stupid anyways. No one's going to be Kurt Cignetti. It's a once-in-a-generation thing. If you're hiring your head coach and you're expecting a one-year turnaround going from what Oklahoma State was, or in this case Indiana, to what they are now, it's not going to happen. With that being said, I think this roster can be competitive. I think this roster can be competitive. I think this team can win 8 games. Just early. It's very early. It's January. The portal's been open for 4 days. But I think that this is going to be a team, especially with when you brought in that North Texas wide receiver core, that offensive core. I am a little excited to see what this team does. Ayo Ajayi, by the way, comes over from James Madison at running back. They've been very intentional in the portal. Oklahoma State has, and Eric Morris has, with the head coach there now, who was at North Texas last season. It's been very intentional. We're getting after it. This is going to be a good team, and I'm excited. I am really excited to see what they can do. Let's take a look at some player rankings here. Obviously, Sam Levitt out there. Chaz Coleman still out there for Penn State, looking like that could be Ohio State if they pay up. Byron Brown, another one today. He's going to follow Alex Golesh. He's going to Auburn from USF. He had a very good season this past year. One of the favorite group of 5 quarterbacks, maybe the best of the bunch. He's going to go to Auburn, and I think that's cool. I think that's really, really cool for Auburn, because they, do they need to be good again? No. Would it be a little bit more interesting in the SEC if they were competitive again? Sure. I absolutely think so. And when you could bring a guy like Golesh in, who it remains to be seen what he can do at the Power 4 level. When you bring a guy like Byron Brown in, it remains to be seen what he can do at the Power 4 level, but it gives you a little bit of hope. A little bit. And to me, I think you had more. I was not high on Auburn at all. I thought they were a 7-5 team at best that's coming into this year, and they go 5-7. I was never all that high on them this year. I know some people were. I know they were ranked at one point. But this team, behind Byron Brown, you have your building block. Now you have a direction you can go in. And that's a phenomenal sign. John Tez Williams, he goes to SC. Amari and Miller to Arizona State. I did miss that one. Look, I've been very high on Amari and Miller. I've been extremely high on Amari and Miller. I was extremely high going into this season. I think that's a really nice pickup for them. Cutter Boley will be their quarterback, so I think, remains to be seen what he's going to do. But that's a phenomenal pickup. Hollywood Smothers, running back from NC State. Look, this to me was probably my favorite running back in the portal. Maybe even more than Isaac Brown, truly. This is such a fun young player who I said on my TikTok page, which, by the way, if you're not following in there just yet, jet.garrett on TikTok. But I said that this was the kind of kid that's going to play at a premier program, whether that was Ohio State, whether that was going to be LSU, whether that was going to end up being Alabama. I said he was going to be at a premier program, and now he is. I'm excited for that. I'm excited. Again, we don't know what Ty Simpson's going to do. Is Austin Mack going to be the quarterback at Alabama next season? I don't know. A lot remains to be seen. Again, we're just 4 days into this. People are still entering the portal. I think we need to take a look at Penn State. Because they're starting to build their team a little bit. Rocco Becht will be their quarterback. They brought in Ben Brahmer. They brought in Zay Robinson. I texted some of my friends and I said, Matt Campbell is kind of turning Penn State into Penn State. Not Iowa State. Penn State. It feels like not a whole lot's going to change. And what I mean by that is James Franklin's thing was he's going to win 10 games, but he's not going to win the big one. Maybe that's what it's looking like here. But again, this gives you a building block. This gives you something to build off of. This gives you a competitive roster in year one. Like, no one's expecting a national championship out of Matt Campbell in year one. But he certainly now has a building block and something to go off of. But Rocco Becht, I don't know how I feel. I'm not a Rocco Becht guy. I'm just not. But maybe at Penn State things will be a little bit different. Listen, Tosh Lapoy, we just mentioned him a little bit earlier. He picks up Ian Strong to come play a receiver for him. He picks up Adam Muhammad from Washington to come play running back for him. That's really been it. Solomon Williams, an edge from Texas A&M's going there. Jacob Arope from South Dakota, offensive tackle. He's going to be going there. I'll be curious. I do think that Oregon, they're still in the playoffs, so, a lot can change. A lot of players on that defensive side of the ball could decide that they want to enter the portal as well. But sure, we'll definitely keep something posted there. Contravian Wisner to Florida State. Let's talk about Florida State for just a second here, because I've seen some things of maybe they're going to be getting DJ Lagway. I know they had him there for a visit. Contravian Wisner, that's a pretty big start, although they did pick up Ashton Daniels. They did pick up Ashton Daniels earlier today. I like Ashton Daniels. I liked him at Stanford going into his, I guess that would have been his freshman season, maybe redshirt freshman season last year. This year, with Jackson Arnold there, I didn't think he really was going to compete for the starting job, but I thought at some point, if things hit the fan, that Ashton Daniels had a chance to come in and perform at a really high level, and I thought he did. I thought he played really well. I thought he played decent in the Alabama game. Florida State, okay. Norvell, this is a make or break year for him. I mean, if he has another down year, then he's probably getting the can. Ethan Grunkemeyer, Penn State's quarterback, looking like he's going to go to Virginia Tech with James Franklin. Parker Livingstone today, an interesting one. He goes from Texas. Was he going to go to Indiana like a lot of people thought? A lot of people said it was Indiana, Oklahoma. He goes to Oklahoma. The Red River Shootout means a little bit more. I haven't seen any announcements, and maybe I missed it, of John Mateer coming back. But if that's the case, I mean, this is just another weapon for him. So hopefully they are really committed to making some moves here and being able to get back into it. Austin Simmons, we mentioned him a little bit earlier in the show. He's going from Ole Miss. He's going to Missouri. So Eli Drinkwitz has his guy. Is it a make or break year for Eli Drinkwitz? I don't know. I guess we're going to find out. As far as the portal goes right now, I mean, those are the big ones that we have seen up to this point. Just kind of looking here. Mekhi Hughes goes from Oregon to Houston. That one will be interesting to me. I thought he was going to have a really big year, and he didn't. Outside of that, we've seen. I think we've talked about a lot of these big ones. Cam Coleman, I'm going to be pretty intrigued to see where he ends up at receiver, because I think that he's kind of like Eric Singleton, who was his teammate this past year, where at receiver, like, everyone could use another receiver on their team. So I think that Cam Coleman could have a lot of money thrown his way. But that's going to about wrap it up. I think we've covered pretty much all that we need to with transfer portal, with these games that we're going to see in the VRBO Fiesta Bowl and the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Two really big games, Thursday and Friday. So you've got 2 days to sit with this. And, let me know what you think. We're going to be back for a show, hopefully maybe Saturday. Friday, not going to happen. With there being a game happening, we want to kind of see that game play. So maybe we'll push it to Saturday, if not Sunday. But hopefully a video, a show for you guys this weekend would be ideal. But that's going to wrap it up for me today. If you're not following me on Twitter, at jhettgarrett. Same on Instagram, at jhettgarrett. TikTok, that's where I'm the most active, jet.garrett, where I'm going to be kind of updating in real time some things that happened. I got my instant thoughts on Kenny Minchie out last night. Talked a little bit about Indiana's transfer portal haul. Talking about college basketball in there as well. That maybe we'll have some college basketball content coming out on here as this college football season ends. But for now, going to leave you with that. Thank you guys so much for watching. God bless.